childhood up, we have had to conform to a certain social game. And so we're in a constant state of competition. This is the secret. You can't make a mistake.
Welcome, everyone, to Friends of Failure. I'm your host, Sam, and this is my co-host, Megan.
Hey.
Really excited about our guest today. I would like to introduce you to Trish Bennet. Hey, how you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you here. If you don't mind, I'd like to take a moment where you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
For sure. So I'm a motivational speaker and I'm also an author. I started a company called Build Yourself Back Up, and I'm using that platform to talk on a lot of different issues. And the main one is mental health. I spent most of my life living with depression. And when I finally got to the depths of depression, I had to figure out how to get out of it. And from that point, I literally had to build myself out of this dark hole step by step to get to the point where I'm at. And so I'm using my platform to speak on topics like that and also topics about change. It's really important to me to show the world that once we change as an individual, we can actually start changing the whole world.
Wow,
That's
love
awesome.
that. Yeah. Wow. I'm already inspired, and we're a minute into this, right?
It's a good sign.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And depression is it's not a fun topic to talk about, especially when you have to kind of think about your own experiences and try to relive things, right? I think all of us at some point in time in our life, whether it's a little or a lot, right, we have to deal with that. So congratulations on being able to kind of pull yourself out of it. It sounds like you're more of the back end of dealing with that depression.
Absolutely. It took me a good 2 years to get from the point of acknowledging that I was dealing with depression and to get to a point where I didn't want to exit this world. I suffered very deeply at one point in my life. And from that point of the turnaround, it took another 2 years to get to the point where managing depression was very easy. And it was easy also for me to start talking about it.
Wow. Because we're a podcast about failure, I can imagine that you had to deal with several levels of failure while digging yourself out of that experience. Can you talk to us a little bit about kind of how that journey was?
For sure. So when I look back, I felt like a failure my whole life. And the reason for that was because I heard that as a child. Not so much you're a failure, but you're stupid, you're not good enough, why are you trying? And those words stuck with me for so long that when I became a young adult and I became a mom, anytime that I tried to succeed in something, I would hear these words, why are you even trying? Go home, sit down, shut up, kind of thing. And so I would. And I kept digging this hole because of all of these thoughts and all of these memories telling me that what's the point? You're not even worthy enough to be on this planet. So from that point, I had to relive all of them. The only way that we can heal ourselves is to feel the stuff that we need to let go. So the transformation really started when I looked back at everything that was causing the depression from my past and crying about it and writing about it and talking about it, but then also deciding that I needed to be the change. I had to change my thoughts. I had to change the way that I showed up. I had to change the way that I spoke to people. And from that point, I started noticing that that good stuff started coming back to me, but I felt like a failure my whole life. School was extremely difficult for me. And in grade 12, I told my English teacher after we finished reading a novel that was the first time in my life that I actually finished a book, because everyone told me that I was stupid, I couldn't read. And when I sit back and I think about it right now, I was 17 years old, first time reading a book from start to finish. Like that's huge, but I couldn't do it before because I felt like a failure.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so relatable. I feel like everyone in some way has had that pressure put onto them or felt like that in their past. And I think your story and the fact that you're willing to share it and kind of create a platform off of it is going to help a lot of people be like, hey, it's not just me that feels this way, because it's very isolating, right? It feels like you're all alone in it.
Absolutely. Well, especially because society tells us that we're supposed to have proper mental health. We're supposed to be happy. We're supposed to be successful. And when you're not, you're like, well, I suck. Like I'm not doing something
Right.
somebody else is doing. Like, what's wrong with me?
One thing I wanted to touch base on when I was a kid, I think it was we read the Diary of Anne Frank in middle school, and I got this weird inspiration. I want to write stuff down. I just, I was like a kid in middle school. I remember, writing, oh, I did this in class today, like whatever. It had no depth to it, right? And I just kept doing it as an action. And I wasn't like depressed or anything, but later on I dealt with some of my own struggles, and someone brought up like, you've talked about writing in a journal, have you been doing that? And it's like, well, not really. Like I started to almost isolate myself from myself, and I think that's something it's a huge tool that I think everyone should use, right? Of write down your feelings and kind of confront them, right? um you know I think that's something that you're right. We have this mentality of, okay, hey, I'm supposed to be awesome all the time, and then when you don't feel awesome, you're like, something's wrong with me, right? But we're human beings, right? Like there's a natural cycle of ups and downs, right?
There is. And I think that's important to get out there, that we're supposed to feel ourselves. We're supposed to experience sadness and anger. But what we're not supposed to do is to hold on to that. We
Mhm.
need
Yeah.
to create emotional intelligence, right? So we can feel our stuff and then let it go and move on. But again, if we don't move on, and we just continue to pile on top of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a good point too, is building that skill on your own is very challenging. From your experience, was it something you had to do by yourself, or did you reach out to certain tools or platforms or other people to kind of figure out that piece of it?
I would say that was probably 50-50. I did 50% on my own and 50% reaching out. I did get a counselor when I first acknowledged my depression, because I didn't know how to deal with it. So that route got me going. But from there, just learning tools like breathing, like proper breathing techniques. When you have that, you can calm yourself down in a tough situation. You can calm yourself down when the thoughts go out of control. So what I did was I started learning just individual tools that I started to apply, and they were helping me move forward. Adding in affirmations, that was huge for me, because I never had positive talk in my head, never. And so that was a difficult one to switch, like to switch your thought pattern. It takes so much effort and so much time, and you're literally sounding like a broken record in your head, because you're repeating the new thought over and over and over until it becomes what it's supposed to be, which is the proper new thought in your pathways. But a lot of different tools. I like when Sam said about journaling. I have been journaling for about 5 years straight now. And I probably go through just a coil scribbler like 4 a year, because it's nonstop. Like it's my ideas, it's my thoughts, it's my feelings, it's preparation for something. I'm constantly putting stuff out of my body onto paper, so it's not being held in anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Do
it
you
feels cleansing, right? Like just getting it on paper.
Yeah, like you feel lighter and you feel
Yeah.
happier and freer. And sometimes that energy might feel a little bit scary because it feels so good. And if you're used to feeling really crappy, you're like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like you want to run from it. And I've ran from it for sure. But when you face it and you're like, no, this is the new way. This is the new way of feeling. This is the new way of being. Then you kind of redirect your path towards it, and it gets easier.
I do have two questions now. The first one is, That's a lot of journaling, right? So do you save these, or do at some point you have maybe a process where you like I don't know, burn like
I was
several
about to
journals and
say
like
she's
let
having
them
like a
go?
bonfire.
Yeah, just like a
So
ceremony.
yeah. When I first started my healing process, what happened for me was I had a spiritual awakening.
Mm.
So a lot of that came in, and learning to actually burn your writing was important, especially when it was really dark and heavy. So at the beginning of my healing, I did burn a lot of stuff. I'd have ceremonies, I'd get out like sage, and I'd get out just things that my crystals and stuff like that, to just feel like I was releasing it fully. Once I got past that darker stage, I started keeping my notes, because I started noticing that I was writing things down that were meaningful and
Mhm.
stuff that maybe I can actually talk about in the future. And so I have a box in my basement of all my journals, and I currently have two journals that go at one time. One is thoughts, just all of the stuff that I need to put out. And the other one is my manifesting journal. I write all the things that I want to create. I write all my dreams and my desires, and I put it in that. And I keep them separate because they hold different energies for me.
That's awesome. The second question is, I feel like we're unpacking a lot of stuff, right? I'm loving this. So, my second thing is, so you're not wrong, right? We are what we think, right? And we become what we think, and that's what feels so evil about depression, is that you're in your head, and it's the negative talk, and it becomes a negative feedback loop, and it just goes and goes and goes, and then eventually it can just get out of hand. So when you tell a person, I've been saying it a lot lately of, I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for that, because it's easy to go like, I hate everything, right? But my actual question is this: with affirmations, is that something that you would force yourself to do? Okay, I've gotten out of bed, I'm going to look at a piece of paper and it says like, what would an affirmation sound like, right? And how would you apply that? Like, do you have exercises that you would do on a, like, throughout the day, maybe on an hourly basis or something?
I did put affirmations up on the mirror in the bathroom. So I did see them first thing in the morning.
Mm.
When I started with affirmations, they were, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough. But my brain called bullshit. It was like, no, you're not. Sorry, I don't believe
Oh,
you. So when I first started and this was happening, I realized that I don't believe myself yet. So how do I take a step even further back? So I took everything that I was writing and putting out for me to read, and I realized that, okay, I don't believe myself that I am worthy, but I can believe that I'm becoming worthy. So when
okay.
I took this step back to say that I want to be this, I believe I can, I'm becoming this, it was many steps towards the actual affirmation that I absolutely believe now, which is, you're enough. I don't question it anymore. I'm enough just as I am.
Yeah, and
That's awesome.
I like that you brought up that it's steps. It's not like all at once, hey, I'm good, I feel I'm enough, I'm not depressed, just like that. It does take time, and it kind of builds right on top of each other.
Yeah. And the example that I tell people when I talk is, imagine you're in a forest and you're walking down a path that has been walked on for 1,000 years. You got trees all around you, but you're walking with freedom. That's what it is to have a pathway of thought. It's super easy. There's nothing in your way. You go, go, you go, you go. So the negative thinking is like this pathway that's been open for so long, so easy to go down. And then all of a sudden you take a hard left and you're going through the bush and you're like, I can't get through this. And you're really having to look and step and push things out of the way. And then if you go for a certain distance and then you come back, it's a little bit easier. Like, you've moved a couple bushes out of the way, you kind of see your footsteps, and then you turn around and you go back. And if you keep going back on the new path, eventually it will be easier to walk through.
That's an awesome
Um,
metaphor.
I'm assuming you're speaking from experience, right? Like, this is how you were able to kind of get to that point, right? So, I mean, can you tell us a little bit about, so you acknowledged it, you got some help, of course, but you start practicing these. How often do you think you had to deal with that? where you kept coming back to the negative pathway, right? The one that was so easy and natural because it had been there for so long. And were there any times that you ever thought you were going to give up, like in terms of you started the process of healing and developing yourself in a new light, and then you just like, maybe you had a bad headspace day and it just kind of brought you back?
Yeah. It was daily. It was daily.
Really?
When you're stuck in a very deep rooted pathway of thoughts, it is not easy to just redirect and get out of it. It took practice, it took persistence, it took me believing that I could get better. And then when I get these little glimpses of things feeling better, and I was actually attracting better things into my life, it was evidence that the work was working. And if I could just keep going and keep even adding new tools and techniques, I'd get better. But it was daily, it was hourly. I would tell myself, okay, girl, let's go to the gym. There's so many good reasons why. And then it's like, yeah, but you're not even that good at it. Like people are watching you, probably laughing at you. And I'm like, whoa, like, come on now. Like, all I'm doing is going to the gym and I'm just getting hit. And then I want to go to the grocery store and it's like, yeah, but now you're in your sweaty gym gear. People are going to laugh at you. It's like, it was nonstop. So it was immediate. It was learning to hear the voice that changed everything, because it was on autopilot before, just running. I had no control. It was hearing the thought either the moment it happened or in the moment that I had to stop it. It was abrupt. It was, no, I am not thinking this. We're going to think this. And I would tell myself the new thought, and then I'd move on. And then another bad thought would come up. Boom, I'm stopping you. I'm not listening to this. This is not my truth. This is my truth. I say it and I move on. It was literally hour by hour some days.
Wow. You were like in the trenches,
Yes.
it's a battle, right? Or I guess you could say it's a war and you're trying to win and push through by winning battles, right?
Absolutely.
I find it interesting because I feel like I can relate to a certain degree. And I think it's interesting how a lot of people listening to this could relate in some form or fashion, but I think a lot of people, we become subject to the reality and the norm of our society, which is, man, I don't want to feel these bad feelings, I'm going to drink. Yeah. Right. And then drinking is a depressant, right? Like
it just
really
makes it worse.
Yeah, like you feel a little different, so you think it's better because maybe it doesn't feel so suffocating, but ultimately what's happening is
you're avoiding it.
You end up crawling into a space that might actually be worse than just the day-to-day, where maybe you're sober, right? And I find it interesting because I'm not here to say that you shouldn't enjoy, relaxing or, whether it's alcohol or anything else. But, now that you're trying to help other people with the things that you learned on your journey, is that something that comes up where, sometimes depression leads to substance abuse,
Absolutely. In my family, there's a lot of alcoholics. I never went towards that, and I actually haven't had a drink in almost 2 years. And that was just a personal choice. I actually didn't enjoy how the alcohol felt in my body. But there is, it's legalized here in Canada that we can smoke marijuana. So there have been times where when life got to the point where I'm like, I can't do it. I go buy some, sit down, take a moment, and I would feel better. But then you get into the cycle of, oh, well, this makes me better, so I'm going to do it. Well, this makes me better, and I'm going to do it. So I had to watch that because, there's addiction in my family. So I have to be aware.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a good point on marijuana and like other substances besides alcohol. It can be the same thing where it comes into a daily habit. And maybe you start as, oh, I'm feeling bad, I'm going to smoke. And then it turns into 3 years later and you're like, oh, I smoked every day for 3 years. I don't remember everything that was going on, or I didn't, deal with all this stuff that I had before. It's it's an interesting part of the process. And I think everyone can kind of relate to that in a way, even if they aren't abusing a substance, but maybe it's a different form of avoidance as well, too.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways that we can avoid or problems or our challenges or our thoughts. You know, there's alcohol, there's shopping, the list goes on. What's actually the most scariest thing to do is to address your stuff, to feel your stuff. It's actually more scary than going down the road of the substance, because that feeling of witnessing your thoughts and your feelings and it hurts is painful. And you're right, Megan, once you get 3 years down the road and all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, what do I do now? You not only have the rest of their life before the 3 years, but those 3 years, and probably the guilt of not doing anything for 3 years. And that's it's not an easy way to live, and it's really hard to get out of.
I think my takeaway for like the listeners is just, if you get stuck into that, be mindful, because it will spiral into something where it's a daily occurrence.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it gets wild because, okay, so mental health is being talked about a lot more now. And where I think we fail is, hey, we need to help each other out. If someone comes up to me and they're like, hey, I'm done, I'm checking out, I'm not against being a person like, hey, how do I help you? Right. But honestly, it's like, what do you do? Like, all of a sudden it's like, okay, hey, I hear you. Like, how do I help you? Right. How do I help you help yourself? And it's a scary topic to think about. You know, unfortunately, I've lost people due to, for whatever reason, you know, they got to the point where they're like, I'm out. And some of them, like, no one knew it was coming. It just kind of happened. Right. And then, you know, on our end, there's that whole survivor issue. But to stay on topic, I think it can be easy sometimes to like say to yourself, hey, I have a problem. But then it's scary because you feel maybe like a shame, right? Like I think when I've been in one of my darkest places of my life, I felt shame even trying to say it out loud to myself, you know, and it's no one's fault, right? But there is something going on in like the world mechanism of how we are treated as human beings that, oh, I gotta take care of my image, right? Like, I don't want people to know that I'm having issues. And as you were talking earlier, I started to kind of contemplate and wonder if, like, I work out excessively sometimes. Like, if I have the time, like, I'll go and I'll just keep going and keep going because it's like it's my safe space. You know what I mean? I don't have to think about the anxiety of whatever's going on in my life because the focus is just keep picking things up and put them back down, run a little bit farther. Right. And so, you know, I guess one of my questions for you would be, what is your thought on, I mean, like, food can be an addiction, right? Shopping can be an addiction. So some of these things that we do maybe to cope aren't necessarily bad things, but anything in an abundance can be detrimental, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're using it to cope or you're using it to distract yourself from life, from your issues, from moving forward on something, then it just becomes, you know, detrimental to your future. And you're right, like, you can have certain things in small quantities, working out for an hour, getting a bite to eat and not overdoing it, watching a show and only one show instead of binge watching for, you know, 5 days in a row. You know,
Right.
people do that because it distracts them. And I recognize it too. I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't have a TV. I only have like little subscriptions on my laptop. But when I do pull something up and I watch it, all of a sudden, like an hour later, I'm like, whoa, where did my life go? Like, I didn't think about anything. Like, I was so focused, which is nice. It's nice to step away sometimes, but you can see how when someone's feeling so much shame or guilt or anger or sadness, that when the distraction leaves and they got to sit in their own body and their own head, it freaks you out. Like, you can't handle it. So you go to the next thing that distracts you.
My brother calls me out sometimes. We call it doom scrolling, but it's sometimes I'll just, oh, hey, I want to share something with Megan, right? And it'll be on Instagram, and I'll like send her like a funny dog photo, right? But then the next thing I know, it's been an hour and a half, and I'm like, what was I doing? And I was just scrolling through images, and of course I'm interacting a little bit, but it's easy to do, where it'll just pull you in. I mean, just like you said, like with subscriptions on certain television, right? You don't even have to do anything. It could just be like,
Yeah.
hey, do you want to stop? And if you don't object, it goes,
It just keeps going. It makes it so easy. Yeah.
The Friends theme song starts playing again. You're like, they'll be there for me, man.
Yeah, it's meant to be. It's starting up again. So
yeah, we are meant to be here. I'm kind of curious, like, so you've created this thing called Build Yourself Back Up, right? You've gotten to help people, right? Like you've gotten to take what you've been through and kind of translate it to help other people.
I have. So I've been doing talks, and I've been doing workshops, and in a book as well. And I'm just about to join another team to do another book. And through just the conversation and through the words that I write, I feel as though people are getting a glimpse of even themselves. So like, hey, I can relate to that. And when it's relatable, then people want to listen and join in. I don't do coaching. I think that coaching is a fantastic opportunity and profession for people. But the way that I like to show up is to lead by example. The only way people change is if they want to change. You can give them all the tools, you can give them all the resources, but if they don't apply it, nothing happens. So when I show up the way that I do and I live my life the way that I do, people take notice. And then they're like, I want that. So how do I get it? So I don't constantly go out and promote, telling people that I can change them, but I promote change in regards to the way that I've done it.
Yeah, you're providing more of tools, and it's for the people that are ready to kind of take the reins a little bit, and they want to commit to it. Yeah.
And the commitment part, like you said, like it's huge. If you don't have commitment, you're probably not going to change much. It might be small at a time, which is fine. That's another thing that I tell people. You have to be patient with it yourself, and you have to take time to do it. Like I mentioned earlier about changing the pathways in your thoughts, it's not going to be done in 1 week. It's going to take time for that new way of thinking to come in, and even showing up differently, like taking away the bad habits for new habits. Just to teach myself that the first thing that I want to do in the morning when I get up, to drink a glass of water, took me like 2 weeks just to finally like get it going, right? And that's the easiest thing for me, to wake up, grab a glass of water, so it does take a lot of time, but it's effort as well.
Yeah.
That's where.
Go ahead.
So all I was going to say is that's where I think the topic of failure gets really weird. And that's because, just like you said, something so simple of, all right, hey, this is my new task in the morning. I'm going to get up and I'm going to drink water. And that's something I do. And I honestly, I've been doing it long enough now. I don't remember how it started, but it was one of those things where, man, I need more water in my life. And after sleeping is a good time to drink water because, whether you're sweating or not in your sleep, your body's still doing a lot of function that, it takes water to move and blah, blah, blah. But that little thing of, man, I got up and I didn't even try to drink the glass of water. All of a sudden it's like, I'm a failure, right? I failed miserably. And it's like, it's okay. Like you're human. You didn't drink any water then, but you drink water later. And it's interesting how it becomes like a slippery slope, right? So you have like this like tiny little task of make sure you brush your teeth in the morning, and you're driving on your way to work and you go, oh gosh, I forgot to brush my teeth. And depending on how harsh you are on yourself, it turns into,
it snowballs.
Oh, well, then you also didn't you didn't really eat that good of a breakfast either, did you? And then, oh, you know what else? Like you drive like a crazy person. You're like, it turns into the snowball effect, just like Megan said. And it's scary because I have good days and bad days, right? And on social media, of course, I'm not really like taking a picture of myself like, hey guys, having a real bad day, I'm only posting like man, I had a great workout or whatever, right? And so when you go to help people and provide them these tools, like I caught myself years and years ago when I was maybe starting to identify that I was going through maybe depression, right? That I was always also trying to play the blame game, which was, I think, in hindsight, was kind of a failure for me. Of I wanted to try to have the courage to embrace maybe dealing with those negative things going on that were causing depression. But then as soon as I dealt with it just a little bit, it was like, oh, it's not me. It's that mechanism in your brain of rationalizing, I guess, but like in a very non-rational way.
Yes.
I don't know. It's just the whole topic's crazy to me.
Yeah. I think that blaming is a natural way for us to get out of our own hole of thinking that we're the problem. I didn't have the easiest childhood growing up. And when I got older and had kids of my own, I blamed my mom big time. I pointed the finger, I judged her. And I became a single mom like she did. My kids were young and I was young. And then all of a sudden I got the perspective. Holy smokes, it's not easy. Well, no wonder it was tough for her. No wonder she wasn't always in the best mood and may have not said the nicest things and, that kind of stuff. And it's easy to go and blame, but when you blame and you judge, it's only a reflection of yourself. So then you take that reflection and you work on that. You let go. Okay, mom, you did what you had to do and it worked. Now I need to see the reflection of the way that I parent and see maybe I could do a better job too.
That's a great point. I eventually had that moment, right, where you go through like your 20s or whenever time you experience it of, mom and dad could have done this or family could have done that. And then you start to put pieces together of, I'm in my 30s now and I'm like, oh my God, like how did they do this? And they had kids. I don't have any kids, right? But being able to recognize that, another thing that pops into my brain is, me and my girlfriend, we've already had the conversation of like, we want to do this forever, right? We're committed to each other. And so we each have baggage that we're dealing with. And then now we're kind of sharing that, but being able to get into like an argument or something and go, wait a second, like, let's think about what we're saying, why we're saying it. And one thing we talk about a lot is how, I could be having a decent day, but there's just stress and whatever going on. And same with my partner, right? And then we meet up and we're just projecting stress or projecting, insecurities or whatever. And it's like, wait a second, like, let's kind of get back into like loving and, what can we do to kind of manage that? And I think it's really interesting how maybe journaling, right? Like, have you ever talked to people or done anything like that where you have like a spouse and you share a journal? Or do you think journals should very much be like hey, this is for you and it's supposed to be very intimately just yours to write in?
I do have boundaries around my journals. I'm single right now, but what I've put out to the universe is that when I do introduce a man into my life and into my kid's life, that he will respect my journals because I put everything in them and it could be misinterpreted sometimes. I write about my kids, and if my kids were to read some of my thoughts, I love them, but some days
you gotta let it,
right?
Gotta
I
vent.
need to let it out. And I can't do it to them. That's not the right way to show up. So I do have boundaries around it. If I wanted to share something, I would open it up and read it. I would never offer it to anyone. My daughter is 10 years old and I've been getting her to journal. And over the last year, I've noticed her doing it at bedtime before she falls asleep. And I had this moment where I saw her journal and I wanted to read it. I wanted to know what's going on. But, if I set boundaries around my stuff, then I have to, respect her boundaries. That's her journal. If she wants to talk about it. So I can see the temptation of wanting to know, but no, I keep my boundaries around that.
Yeah, I could agree with that. That was a great answer. I can't, there are times that I remember when I was younger and I would journal and it was just funny stuff. Like I was just being silly or I was trying to figure things out and I was just kind of talking to myself. Right. And I would definitely, that would be a temptation to be like, hey, I wonder what my kid's thinking. Right. But I agree with you. Like, if you're going to have boundaries for yourself, you should respect those boundaries with other people. Unless, like, I mean, if your 10-year-old came up to you and was like, hey, mom, I want you to read this, I'm assuming you'd just be like, okay, then great, let's do it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely be in on that. I'm very open with my kids about feelings and talking to them. The one thing that I tell my kids is, when you grow up, and my daughter has said this to me even now, she's like, I'm going to be a better mother than you.
Oh my God.
I tell my kids, when you grow up, my hope is that you're a better parent than me,
Yeah.
because I chose to be the change from the way my mom parented, and I love her and we've got a great relationship now, that I want my kids to take the good stuff that I teach them, the failures that I show up with, and change them. And then when they have children and they teach them the better ways of parenting and loving and showing compassion and showing up the right way, then they propel that healing to the planet going forward. And then every generation after them, if they choose to teach them the right way, we eventually tip the planet over to the point where we're not suffering and we're not in fear and anger. We're in a place of loving each other, and there's compassion, and there's opportunities for people.
I think you bring a really good point about generational baggage, kind of, that our parents pass kind of their baggage from their parents, and it just kind of keeps going. But when you make that choice, the very intentional, hey, I want to improve upon what my parents did, not pass it down or make it worse. Because I know people or have heard of people where it just gets worse as it goes down kind of the line. But if we can break that, like you're saying, and evolve as generations go on, it can create kind of a cultural or societal shift, one family or kind of line at a time. I really like that.
Yeah. I started a thing recently. I read it somewhere, and it was talking about being able to, and I'm not talking like your great grandparents, I'm talking like way down the line. We have no idea, right? I mean, I guess you can figure it out if you try hard enough, but thanking your ancestors that paved the way to get to where, eventually your parents had you, right? But I do think that we have entered an era where we've become mindful enough, and we have the time and the resources where, okay, hey, I'm going to break the cycle, right? I'm going to be the one that goes, okay, where I think maybe we struggled was emotional intelligence, or, hey, maybe where we struggled was knowing the knowledge we needed to know to change the direction, right? Because even though it's a good thing, right, and there's a lot of positivity that can come from it, it could feel very negative to a lot of people that are involved, right? Where it's like, hey, like, I love you and I care about you, and thank you so much for what you've done, but I think it's time that I am going to be the one that creates the change. And it's like, well, what do you need to change, right? And we're all human, we get defensive. I get defensive over the dumbest things, right? Like, why don't you want to choose my movie? Like, what's wrong with my movie, right? And I think it's really important to be able to say that and have people hear that, right? Of, hey, maybe you feel strange or like an outsider in your village, if you will, and maybe it's because you're supposed to be the one that creates the change.
Yeah. And I often feel that way when I'm around groups of parents. I felt like I missed out on my childhood because I had a lot of situations to deal with that were not meant for children. And all I wanted to do was get out of it. I just wanted to grow up, get out of my childhood, be an adult, and move on with my life. So I missed out. And so when I look at my kids now and anything that we do, I'm always signing us up for 3. I have a son, a daughter, and myself. So I have my own toboggan. When we go tobogganing, we show up at the hill. I'm the only parent with a toboggan, and I'm flying down the hill. And then all of a sudden, like 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, I see a parent, let me use your toboggan to their kid, and they go take a run down, and they realize how much fun it is. And so just even showing up that way and showing parents that you can still have childlike fun, still be a good role model and take care of your kids, but you don't have to stand by and just watch them have all the fun. So even those little switches
Mm-hmm.
And another one, like I grew up, my discipline as a child was the silent treatment. And depending on the severity of what I did, I got the silent treatment for days if it was bad. So when I had kids, I started applying the silent treatment as their punishment. So I ignore them, I'd walk away, I like nothing, like they got no attention from me. And that was those moments where like, this doesn't feel good. Like I'm not doing anything to make it better. I'm not teaching them what was wrong. I'm not teaching them how to do it right. Like I'm ignoring them. And it was having those mindful shifts when you realize this isn't helping them, to the point where like even getting out of giving them the silent treatment to sitting down, holding space for them, listening to them, having a conversation, open conversation back and forth. It was huge for me. It was such a big change. And it was, one of many that I had to do, but it really changed everything for my kids too.
It's gonna be hard to identify that and then force yourself to, because I'm sure maybe when you really identified it, right, like you would start doing the silent treatment thing and then go, oh wait, it's happening again, right? Stop it, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm the hardest person to say no to sometimes, right? Like myself, of, well, I'm doing it because of this, and it's like, well, why are you really doing it,
It's hard to unpack that stuff, especially like if it's how you grew up, because it seems normal, or like this is just how things are. And I'm sure like in parenthood, it is hard to catch it because you're like, well, this is what my parents did and I turned out okay, I'm fine, or whatever, or I learned from this in some way. But it's good that you can be critical of it and be like, hey, I think there's a better way. Like there's a way I can still get the message across and also teach them and make it a positive experience instead of what you went through. Yeah.
I was thinking about the whole thing of like, well, when I was a kid, my dad let me jam a fork into the socket. I turned out okay. It's like, don't let your kid jam a fork in the, like, it's okay, in some standard to like, let them fall and pick themselves back up. But like, let's take the fork out of the socket gag, out of the norm,
That brings up a good question. When talking about failure with your kids, or they have, shortcoming, how do you approach it with them?
Well, with my kids, the best thing that I do is if they're having a moment of failure, I let them have it. I let them express it, like cry, stomp your feet, whatever it is, get it out. And then we sit down and we talk about it. And the one thing that I'm teaching my kids, that failure isn't a bad thing. Failure is actually experience, because you can't get better at something until you realize, okay, this isn't the right way. So how do I do it right? And you got to practice and you got to get better, and you will still always fail even though you're getting good at something. So I sit down, I talk with them, I let them understand, better ways of showing up. If you want to get upset, that's fine. You need to find a safe place, a healthy place to do it. You don't do it in the middle of the classroom and have a tantrum. You come home, you have a moment with me, we talk about it, we cry about it, and then we figure out, well, what's a better way of viewing it? How can we see it differently? And that's the biggest thing is, my failures that I still do today, I don't get upset with myself anymore. I stop and I pause and I say, okay, so we went this way, what's a better way? And I'll come up with some different ideas in my mind. Okay, next time, let's do that and try it. And if it doesn't work, so what? And so that's the approach that I take with my kids.
So that's great. I think it's strange for me. I'm in my 30s and I have this feeling still of like, gosh, like I'm still failing at things. And it's like, you should be failing your whole life, right? The only way you're going to keep, the saying goes, those that avoid failure are also avoiding success, because you can't have one or the other. They go together. It's yin and yang, right? Yeah. And, I one thing that I've noticed about myself is I'll look back at things that happened a decade ago and I'll be like, hey, I failed in these things and I grew from them. Like, I'm done growing. And it's like, that was a decade ago. Like you're not going to grow anymore. Yeah. And so being able to teach like your kid, that's a lot of power, right? Especially social media, right? It's a fun place and can be a great way to share and interact. But there's also, I mean, there are people, adults and probably children, right, that they get really upset about something like, you know what, I'm gonna blow up on Instagram, or I'm gonna blow up on Facebook, and they just give their peace of mind and you can't take it back. Whereas like that safe space of journaling, you can burn it. Nobody ever has to see it, right? Just light that thing on fire, it's gone forever, right?
Exactly.
Get it off your chest and it's gone. Yeah,
definitely that healthy space of doing it. I have a great example of what I used with my kids. Like anytime that I try something, I'm always telling them about it. It's good, it's bad, how it turned out. And so last year I made a 25-year-old dream come true, and that was to own and ride my own motorbike. So last year I got my learners, I booked myself in for a safety course, and then COVID happened. So my course was canceled, but I didn't let it stop me. I still went and bought a bike. I didn't know anyone that rode, and I had to ride with someone that had their license. So I joined a couple of Facebook groups for bikers, met some people, made some friends. I didn't get my license last year. And the reason for that was because during practice mode, I kept tipping my bike over. In the parking lot, I tipped it over. And then one time we get on the street and I stall out at a stop sign and boom, I tip it over. Thankfully, the gentleman, like my friend, she had already, motored off because I was following her. A gentleman in a car behind me jumps out, because my bike's like 550 pounds. He comes up and he helps me get my bike up. He's like, don't worry, I've been here. And so then this year, when it was time for the season to start, I almost gave up. I was looking at the cost of my bike to see if I could sell it. I was freaking out because I just felt like a failure. I'm like, how am I going to ride if I keep tipping my bike over? So I kept pushing myself. I kept challenging myself, and I rebooked my safety course. I was able to take it. I tipped my bike in the safety course. And I told my kids about it. I'm like, I keep tipping my bike. I don't know. And they're like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, I'm going to keep going. And this past Monday, I took my road test and I passed.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome.
Right? So so it took me 2 seasons. I had originally planned for one, felt like a failure last year because I couldn't make it happen. Almost didn't get up and try again this year. But I wouldn't stop because I had the dream. And so when I tell my kids, I'm like, I tipped over, but I got back up and I kept going. And the next time I was so scared to get out and ride, but I still showed up. I didn't cancel and I went. And then eventually the tip overs, they stopped. I got really good. And like I said, I got my license on Monday, and now I can ride with just myself. I'm riding solo. So
that's awesome. Congratulations. I assumed that the obvious answer would be you attach a sidecar to the bike and then you can't tip over, right? Which I'm completely ignorant about motorbikes. So
it's
maybe
a whole different thing.
You tried, right? Like you just really try to tip it over. But now I guess not to project like a goal on you or anything, but now I feel like I need to see you in BMX. Like you're just flying off of ramps and doing kick flips, and
that's next
just
year.
A full backflip. Yeah.
I got to get on the highway first. The fastest I've gone is 70. So I haven't even gone highway speed yet.
Oh, wow.
Baby steps. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's totally different than a car, right? Like the environment is interacting with you so much more. Yeah. There's times that I see people on motorcycles and I get a little jealous. I mean, because if they want to, and if they're safe about it, they can kind of weave through traffic a little differently. There's a lot of risk, but there's a little bit of reward, right? But then that goes hand in hand of anytime I've ever thought about getting a bike, I'm like, okay, like what would I use it for? Right? Would I just stay in like the calm and, go for a Sunday drive kind of vibe, right? Yeah. But that's so exciting.
It's a great lesson too, because just over and over, like almost giving up, feeling like I can't get to this, I'm just not going to get to it, sharing all of that with your kids. And then even though it wasn't the original timeline, which I try to go back to this a lot, that life doesn't always happen in those nice little timelines, either that we set for ourselves or that society or something else is set for us. And when it finally does happen, it feels great, right? Like it feels like this long coming win.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And expectations, I think, go well with failure. If you set too high of expectations, you're going to feel like a failure.
Yeah.
Right. And I did set the expectation that I would get my license last year only because I thought so. But, when COVID happened, we had a lot of rain last year. I just let all of that go. It's out of my control. I can't do anything about it. So I reroute my path to make sure I can still get going where I want to go, even though these challenges are showing up and failures are showing up. I'm like, no, like this is the way I'm going to go. And no, it doesn't work, Kate. We're going to turn and we're going to go this way. And eventually get there. But yeah, expectations, if you don't set them super high, you will always achieve your goal. And then the failure stuff goes away because you feel better about yourself.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great point too. Of we do have a lot of things that will pop up on the internet of, hey, like you can make $500 million in a day, like follow my course and like overnight you'll be, and it's like, sure, there are people that can coach you or teach you and kind of put you in a direction where you can become very successful. But we all of a sudden create these, okay, hey, I'm going to be way up here and I'm going to do it in 10 days. And then it's this feeling of failure that's probably just magnified by 100x, right? And being able to break it down into baby steps of like, okay, I got to here. Like, I mean, it was a success for you of being able to buy the bike, right? And I mean, that was a part of it, that's a win. Even if you don't have the license to drive it, it's like, hey, I'm one step closer. I have the motorbike,
Yeah.
And that's a great point. I think I beat myself up sometimes still of I'll magnify it in my head and then I feel like way bigger of a failure. But I don't even think about, well, what did you take from it and change the course, right?
Absolutely. Before Build Yourself Back Up, I tried 3 different ways of putting my purpose out there. I started a company called Divine Design where I was doing interior home staging. I tried to do tarot card and mediumship and all these things. And I ended up shutting it all down because it didn't feel right here. And I did have thoughts of failure. But when I look back, the first business that I started taught me how to build a business plan. It taught me how to go and get a business loan and an account. It taught me how to get a license with the government, and doing tarot card reading. That got me out on social media to be visible and get out of my fear of being seen and talking with people. And even though they never lasted, I gained so much wisdom and knowledge from those opportunities. And I'm applying them now with what I'm doing, not just professionally, but personally. The biggest thing that I do right now that keeps me feeling successful is I have a calendar journal. It's this book right here. And every Sunday, I write out my week for a Monday to the next Sunday. I write out my week, all the things that I want to achieve. In the back of the book, I have a list of all the things that I want to balance in my life and all the things that are important. So when I'm writing out my week, I look at my list. So how do I incorporate family? How do I incorporate business? How do I incorporate self-care? And I make time for it. And I'm flexible. Things change. I'm really flexible. Okay, cool. I can move stuff around. I'm not so particular because, again, you feel like a failure if you don't achieve it. But when I get to cross off everything that I've done, I feel so successful. And even if it's just, I did my morning workout and meditation, boom, I did it. Mm-hmm. That's success to me. And it keeps me going. And I don't feel like a failure on a day-to-day basis because I am checking stuff off constantly.
I love that. I had a buddy in school. We still know each other now, but middle school or high school. And he always had a note card and he would have stuff written on it. And it was like, hey, I got to get this. It was tasks and, things that he wanted to do, maybe things that his parents were like, hey, the chores, whatever. But he had a system where, all right, I did it and he got it. It was done. And maybe he wasn't as mindful as you are with that, but it was something that I watched him do it. And I was like, man, that's really smart. Because one, he's not going to forget what his goal is, right? Like I have to achieve this. But then two, you get that feeling. I definitely like the idea of having the calendar, right? I have a book myself, actually. It's this little guy right here, but it's not, it's just blank pages. And so I write out like the week, I write out like thoughts or, oh, hey, don't forget this, right? But I think, maybe I should take a page out of your book, literally, of, have the calendar, have this is what the focus is, and this is what we're building to.
Yeah. And when you only
That's a
do a
great tool.
week at a time, it's not high expectations, right? Like it's
Mhm.
just small with one day at a time. You only have 7 days that you have to plan, and you're not feeling like you're not going to achieve it because it's only 7 days worth of stuff. So
Mhm.
it feels manageable and that you can actually achieve it.
Yeah.
I
And
feel that.
I use a planner that's kind of similar. It has different categories like family, friends, work, all of that. Some weeks I'm really good at it and it feels great because it's that whole checking off your list and making sure you're hitting all your areas in your life. And then some weeks I don't touch it at all. And at first it annoyed me or made me anxious that I wasn't using it because I wasn't, getting everything that I needed to. But now I've gotten to the point where it's okay to like fail to fill out your planner, not use it for a week. And then I just use like scratch paper and it's just a little to-do list. But as long as you're doing something where you're making sure you get like the basics taken care of, and then later you can move back to that higher level of I need to check off these different areas and prioritize it that way.
That
Yeah,
focus.
absolutely.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of a book called The 12-Week Year?
No, I haven't.
So what their suggestion is that whenever you're trying to be productive or you're trying to achieve goals or tasks, or whatever it is, you can apply it to work, your personal life, whatever, is that what will happen is we fall into this weird trap that we all kind of see and get taught of, okay, so we'll say New Year's resolution, right? All right, it's November, I'm eating a lot because it's the holidays, I'm going to make my goal, I want to lose weight, I want to go to the gym. And then New Year's comes and you like kind of stick to it, but you don't really have a plan. You're just, I'm going to do it. And then some time goes by, life happens, you start to back away from it. And then it kind of happens again where towards the end of the year, you start having this reflection of, oh yeah, I have this New Year's goal of I was going to lose weight. And then you start to kind of jump back into it because for, whatever year, 2021, that was your goal. Well, if you take your goal and you go, hey, let's just put a little bit more, maybe like pressure or just less time where your brain can convince you like, oh, we have all the time in the world, right? Like just you do it tomorrow, and you do that for 300 something days, and then you have a month left and you go, oh my goodness, I have 30 days, and you start applying yourself to it again. I think one thing that's really cool is that if you have a weekly calendar that you fill out, you can have that whole situation of, okay, I didn't get my license for my motorcycle, but I'm going to like now apply that to this next week and see if I can get closer to it, right?
Yeah.
I think that's great. I'm sure you have that happen, right, where things from your current week roll over into the next one.
They do. And that's the flexibility. You have to be able to do that, or else, again, you just feel like you're not fulfilling your commitment or you're failing on your tasks. You just have to be open to change because that's what life is. If there's anything that we know is going to come, it's change.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ever flowing all the time.
I think
Yeah.
the saying is the only constant is change. So
Yes.
yeah, everything's going to change all the time. And my current job is just constant change. And I think I've just gotten to where I'm formed by it. Like it is my whole existence is just embracing change. So I'll have those items in my planner and they will carry over for weeks, like because I just can't get to them or it's not a priority or I forgot. And used to, I would kind of beat myself up and be like, why didn't you do this? Why are you a failure? Why can't you do like these basic things we said? And now I'm like, I'll get to it. It's still there. It's still in the forefront of my mind. I'm not erasing it or, whiting it out. It'll be there eventually when I get to it and I'll achieve it.
Yeah. And I think that we shouldn't over add items to our lists because life is already busy. I'm not sure what you've got going on, but I'm sure it's busy. I've got a job. I'm a single mom. I've got my passion project that I'm working on. I've got goals. I've got friends. I've got family. Like, the list is endless. And when you want to achieve something, you have to find a way to fit it in, right? So even just doing your all adulting stuff, banking, laundry, grocery shopping, on top of all these other things, it can get busy and it can get heavy. So the other thing that I do if I want to achieve a specific goal is I block time out for it. Like I'll mindfully block time. Okay, well, if it's only twice a week for 1 hour, at least I'm putting in some time. I don't push myself to do more if I can't do more. Because when we do too much, then we burn out and we stop doing anything really.
So I guess I'll just call myself out here. One of the things that that I've always done, I've always been very like family oriented, and family has changed over the years for me of what my definition of that is and like who belongs in that circle, right? But I'm a loyalty based person. Like if I'm about you, I am 100% all in. Let's do this. So anytime I get the opportunity, because we are all busy, I will make time for friends, and I will just keep scheduling and scheduling. And like before I know it, I have like 85, hey, let's meet up and do brunch. Let's go do, right? And I get to a point where I'm overdoing it, right? And so I get burnt out because I have no time to myself. And then I'm hanging out with my friends, but I can't even have like a full on experience with them because I'm kind of all over the place at that point, right? And I've been calling myself out on, hey, plan it out, right? Do the week and be able to schedule time with people, excuse me, where you can, it's blocked out for them and it was planned, and it wasn't just, oh, because the opportunity came, I took it,
Yeah.
And you're right. Like,
I was just gonna say, it's really funny. My therapy session, which was yesterday, was literally about this topic. Like we were talking, I was like, I have a lot going on. There's a lot of balls in the air. Like, how do I manage this without getting to full burnout? And she brought up the same points we're talking about now, like blocking out time, not overexerting yourself. Cause I think all three of us can kind of relate to, hey, I want to get all these areas in my life to this certain level. I need to like schedule it out and get it done. And then there's no time for you. And it's just funny that, yeah, that's kind of the theme of the week for me.
Yeah. And you know what? The most important time that you spend is with yourself. Like you're with yourself your whole life. So even just carving out alone time, which I do, I love my alone time, is just reconnecting with myself, doing things for myself, getting my thoughts together. I used to think that putting myself first was selfish, and that's because society told me it was selfish, movies, everything, right? But when I switched that mindset around and said, you know what, the only way that your kids are going to be happy, you're going to be happy, and life is going to feel good is you put yourself first. So when I block out time in my calendar, there's always time for, like, actually tomorrow morning from like 8 to 12, I blocked out quite a bit of time just for me. And I write and I read and I do yoga and I just do what I want to do.
That's awesome. When Megan was saying how it all kind of aligned, I think something I tell myself to comfort myself is I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Right. And, I've said that to people and they're like, okay, well, what if a person has cancer? Are they supposed to be there? I am not the grand master planner of what's happening to us as human beings, but I do think the challenges brought into our lives were meant for us. Right. And it gives you the opportunity to try to prevail, to try to grow, and try to be the best version of yourself. And I think what's wild about that is I chased for a long time of what I thought I would consider would be the best version of myself. But then that's changed every year of my life, right? Like it just morphs into sometimes a better thing, sometimes maybe not such a healthy thing, right? Where I'm supposed to, like, I'm going to be 10'9" and I'm going to just be, the best basketball player. It's like, okay, that's not realistic. Right.
Yeah.
So I did want to, I wanted to give you an opportunity, right? You've been through some very real things, and it's caused you to become like a version of yourself that I think you're very happy with. But, there are people who, it doesn't matter what age they're at, they might be in an unfortunate position, or maybe like a scary place, right? And do you have anything that maybe you started telling yourself, or someone told you, or that you wish someone would have said to you when you were in that darker time of your life?
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually a conversation that I had with myself, and it was daily during the time that it was the hardest. Like getting out of bed was, the hardest thing sometimes. And that was to get up and try. The only thing that I asked of myself every single day during the dark days was just get up and try. If all you can do today is get up, shower, eat, and go back to bed, I'm happy with that. And eventually the shower, the eating, going to the gym became a routine. Shower, eating, going to the gym, coming home and reading a book. It eventually took steps to get there, but I would just tell myself, I just get up and try. That's it. That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking the world from you. Just try. And that was my motivational way of just doing it. It was, okay, all you want from me is to sit out of bed. Okay. All you want from me is to walk to the washroom and have a shower. Okay. Like, they're easy, right? And that's what I told myself. And eventually that get up and try was just, I just got up. I didn't have to ask myself. I just did it.
It became your habit.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. I know myself, and that I overcomplicate things, and I think there's a lot of people that can relate to that. Not everything in life is super simple, but you can break it down, right, into parts. And that's a beautiful thing to be able to say that you accomplished it, right? You broke it down to the simplest form of just get up and try. And that's great. I almost feel like that's like my next tattoo. Like, it's going to be on my arm, right? Get up and try. People are like, what is that? And I'd be like, that's what I do every day. I just get up and I try. And they're like, good for you, man.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. I really enjoyed having you here today. You were fantastic. I really enjoyed this conversation. Before, like, we do our closing out, right? One thing that I was curious about, and I don't know if you can even talk about it, but you mentioned you're working on a book, or you're working with a group for a book.
Yes.
And then you also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you said you already have a book.
Yes. So I'm in volume 4 of Blue Talks. It's a compliment, like the book is a bunch of authors that have written their stories. So I've put one of my stories of where I was in the depths of my depression, and I talked about it, and it was very detailed. And I'm currently writing a book. I've been guided to put some information down, and I'm going for it. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I'm working on it right now.
That's fantastic. Am I able, so I'm a guy that likes to listen to Audible. Would I be able to find that on Audible?
No, I don't think it is.
Okay.
I think it's just paperback right now. It just came out in May.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fresh off the press.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we're in #1 international bestseller right now. So that's,
oh my
that's
gosh.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go order that. I'll see you guys later. I'm gonna go order that. No, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. I definitely will reach out to you after I get to read it, because I would love to continue this conversation again.
For sure.
Yeah. I'm gonna let Megan take it from here. I'm sure she wants to talk about social media.
That's all I want to talk about.
Yeah.
No. So the first call out is we'll definitely have Trish on our pages. So if you find us on Instagram, Facebook, maybe even TikTok, maybe it'll bleed into there as well. We'll make sure to link her pages. She has a website as well as an Instagram and Facebook and everything like that. And then for us, you can find us in all of those places, and YouTube if you want to see our faces, and you are listening to this in audio right now. Please rate, follow, subscribe. Let us know how we're doing. We want to know, is this good? Is this bad? Is it a failure? A podcast about failure? That's a failure.
It's too perfect, right? It's too perfect.
Yeah, there can't be anything wrong, right? And then Sam and I's favorite part is asking for you guys to send in your failures. This can be a funny fail, or it can be a more serious story where you just want to like spread a message or a lesson that you learned. You can email us at friendsoffailurepodcast@gmail.com, or you can call in to our voicemail that we've named Ethel at 916-304-3545.
Yeah, perfect. I love how like it's now been named, and I was thinking that this might be the first episode where I don't talk about Facebook 2008, but there it is.
Oh my
I dropped
gosh,
it in there.
Sam. I can't.
I do want to say our finishing line, which is just remember that life is happening for you, not to you. So go out there and fail.
If it's not I'm stronger than you, it's I'm wiser than you, I'm more loving than you, I'm more tolerant than you, I'm more sophisticated than you. It doesn't matter what it is, but this constant competition is going on. This is the secret. This is the secret. You can't make a mistake.